Hello guys, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica here with Will Safford of
Effective Strength and Conditioning, BJJ Fanatics, Order in Progress.
And today we are going to discuss the rules for BJJ at the best competition in the world. What's the best competition in the world?
ADCC.
ADCC, where's that at?
So it's all over the world, but in 2019, it was in LA. Anaheim was one of the biggest, best jiu-jitsu events. The Anaheim Convention Center was completely packed out. I mean, stages and smoke and lights. It was phenomenal.
That's a huge convention center.
It's never before has the jiu-jitsu community been at that level. Now the next one was supposed to be this year, 2021. Due to COVID, we had to push it back. It's going to be in University of Las Vegas Arena. Even bigger.
Okay.
We're gonna have signs on the Vegas Strip. It's gonna be.
Wait, when is this? Because I really want to come to this.
This is basically this time next year, September of 2020.
All right. Well, we talk all the time, so we'll definitely do that.
Oh yeah, gotta go.
So tell me about the rules for that.
So that one it's very interesting. So it's Nogi, and the first 5 minutes, there's 10-minute matches in regulation. The first 5 minutes are submission only. So there's no points. You have to basically win by submission. And you can't pull guard, so you can't go to the ground. The idea is to encourage people to wrestle.
To encourage people to get back up and make it more active, so we're getting away from that sit down, drag them in kind of thing, right?
Exactly. So no points first 5 minutes, encourage wrestling. At the 5 minute mark, you can then pull guard, and they also have points.
Okay.
It's super aggressive. It's interesting because a lot of people think it's not really jiu-jitsu. They call it submission grappling. It's violent, it's fast.
I like it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then the finals are 20-minute matches, 10-minute of no points, basically, trying to encourage wrestling, and then 10 minutes of points.
So think about the time scale for this. So the preliminary rounds are 10 minutes, 5 minutes of no points, and then it goes into 5 minutes. So that's 10 minutes of some guy trying to rip your neck off.
And you have overtime too.
How long is overtime?
I think it's another 5 minutes.
So now you've got to endure and put out max power for 15 minutes without stop. And the rules are designed to encourage you not to take breaks in the middle. So you have a 15-minute endurance event, which is super complex movement, all based on body flow and your ability to get into weird ass positions. We were watching some videos last night, and the hip mobility of some of these guys is just absolutely astounding, especially under load and the speed at which they roll now. This is not like what was happening back when I was doing jiu-jitsu in the 90s at all. It is very different.
It's super dynamic. They call it like the Olympics of jiu-jitsu. It comes every 2 years, so it's a rare event. And it's the most elite of the elite grapplers in the world. So you have the best technique, the best well-trained guys in absolutely incredible shape. They train for months, years. Some guys, when the ADCC ends, they're already training for the next one in 2 years. So the level is just absolutely insane. And you have match after match after match against the highest level guys for 10, 15 minutes.
So think about the time scales on this. Seagulls. Think about the time scales on this. Like, if you deadlift and you do 3 reps, it takes you 9 seconds. If you're going really slow and you're holding your pauses, it's taking you 25 seconds of max power output. Think about the level of power that these guys have to have because they're holding hip hinge and complex movement for 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time. So it's very different. So when you think about training for this, because that's what we're always thinking about, we're super nerds. We're thinking about the training for this. How would you athletically prepare for this type of thing? Because they really are marathon fight events. It's not like a 3-minute round. It's not a 5-minute round. It's a unending slog of somebody trying to rip your neck off. It's interesting. How does this one differ from the rules that you guys have at BJJ Fanatics in your upcoming tournament?
So in BJJ Fanatics, the Grand Prix coming up in San Diego is just submission only. So you can pull guard. So it's basically very similar to that first 5 minutes in ADCC, but you can pull guard, you can be on your back. But we are trying to encourage the submission and 10-minute matches of no points. And then after that, if there is no submission, it'll go to ref's decision. We've got 3 refs, and then they decide who they think won the match, and they'll continue on to the next round.
So we're going to keep talking about this because we're discussing the different types of strategies that BJJ players utilize in order to prepare for different types of events, and what type of strategy there are, and then the athletic training strategies for them.
Just to give you an idea of some of the other events, there's an event called the UAE JJF.
United Arab Emirates.
Yes.
Okay.
Over in Abu Dhabi, and those are 5-minute matches. 5-minute matches with very fast stalling calls, so you get put on a shot clock really quick.
So if you're stalling, if you're trying to bide time to rest.
Exactly.
Okay.
But 5 minutes is almost, in jiu-jitsu is almost like not enough time to work. But I really like those events because they encourage you to just go out there and move, right? It's short.
Yeah, those are the ones I watch all the time.
Sometimes events where it's 20 minutes, it's like guys know they're going to be in there for a long time. They kind of conserve their energy a little bit. They kind of feel out the other competitor, and see. You've got a lot of different types of rule sets out there. But I think submission only is one of the best.
Okay.
Because it really allows guys to loosen up. They're not playing for points. When you've got point players, they're strategizing, how can I just get the points? When you only have submission only, the points don't matter.
Yeah.
So guys can open up their game, but they don't have to worry about being scored on. Really the goal is to finish the other guy and get to the submission.
I like this idea. Yeah, because point fighting has altered a lot of combat sports. Like you had Taekwondo and it became point fighting, and it changed everything entirely. People stopped kicking. They started doing this different thing. It was about speed and touching, not about actually hitting people.
There was a crazy scenario in the latest Olympics where a guy won a gold medal.
Oh, my God, he got knocked out or something.
He kicked the guy too hard.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's insane to me. Like, that's the whole point of Taekwondo. You're supposed to kick the guy, right?
I mean, Taekwondo, all those jumping kicks, as I understand it, were originally to take cavalry off horses.
Oh, really?
Right? So you had mounted cavalry come in, and so you didn't have horses or heavy armor yourself, so they trained a bunch of dudes to jump up and kick armored dudes off horses so they could jump on them and stab them.
That's insane.
And so like the idea that you could get in trouble for kicking too hard, your job was to kick a dude off of a moving horse. It's weird. The point thing changes the way martial arts are designed. So the rules of each martial art define how it's utilized, because point fighting and wrestling, there's points. So explain that if you can, real quick.
Yeah, well, in wrestling, see, it's interesting because wrestling, every guy who goes out there and wrestles is thinking about putting the guy on his back. They're thinking about the pin. But in jiu-jitsu, it's kind of, because we introduced points, not every guy is thinking about the submission. So that just changes the whole dynamic of the sport. If you watch wrestling, it's 2 minute,
2 minutes instead of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or
just
20 minutes. It's
fierce,
fast,
non-stop action. Those guys are going after it, trying to pin. That's the goal, trying to get the other guy on his back. So that's why, I love watching, especially Olympic wrestling. It's some of the most dynamic, fast-paced action. So that's what I was saying earlier, the previous video, is that jiu-jitsu is still trying to find that perfect rule set that pushes the action but is also fun to watch as well for spectators, and is also fair to the competitor as well.
So if you just keep shortening up the time of the round, does it eventually turn back into Greco-Roman wrestling?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. I just want to know, I love watching Greco-Roman wrestling, but there is nowhere to train it. Like, not even in the biggest cities in the world are there adult Greco-Roman wrestling gyms that you can find. In LA, there's BJJ gyms everywhere now, and they're all pretty good. Yeah. When I was young and I was doing jiu-jitsu, we were still doing Japanese jiu-jitsu, and it was all standing takedown gi stuff, and it was really heavily, looks a lot more like what judo looks like now, and there was a lot less ground game. We would do starting from the ground on our knees back to back, but you did that once every 2 months. You didn't do it every class. You spent all of our time working on the steps and the takedowns, and none of our time working on the specific ground game, just because nobody knew any of that stuff in the 90s. It wasn't like you weren't going to run into a guy who knew BJJ. You were going to run into a guy who could throw a couple of haymakers, and as long as you got inside and chucked him into a car, you were pretty okay.
To your point earlier about there not being those gyms anymore, there's this idea that when a martial art gets introduced into the Olympics, it almost kills the sport. And a lot of people think that this happened with judo. Once judo became an Olympic sport, There used to be judo schools all over the place. Now you can barely find a judo school.
I think there's one in LA that I know of. I've never even been to it because it's way on the west side. It's impossible to get to. It's right in the fanciest neighborhood where there's absolutely no parking. But that's the only one I know about. A lot of the stunt guys train judo very heavily because that's all the entrances that you see in Marvel movies. Every action movie you see now uses Aikido entrances or judo entrances. The really popular one, say from like Black Widow and stuff, is the Russian Sambo entrances with the jump leg attack wrestling stuff. But it's very hard to actually find schools that teach that stuff.
Yeah.
BJJ is everywhere now.
Everywhere.
On a high level.
I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think the fact that you don't train a lot of takedowns in jiu-jitsu, which we can talk about that, and it lends it to, like, you know, people can do this every single day. Businessmen and you know, housewives, and people can do this because you're starting from the knees most of the time. You can go 100%, you get a great workout, and you can get up the next day and go to work.
You're not getting dropped
exactly
hundreds of times at class.
Have you ever seen wrestlers, man? Wrestlers' bodies are just beaten and broken.
Yeah, do you get dropped on your shoulder? There's only so many times you can take that forward drop on your shoulder before you really get messed up.
There is a longevity aspect to it. It's kind of this like user friendliness to jiu-jitsu, and it's a lot of fun. It's addicting. So I think that's one of the main reasons why it's everywhere.
All right, we're gonna keep talking about this stuff because we're nerds. What are you gonna talk about in the next video?
Maybe training for jiu-jitsu or strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu?
Strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu.